This is Ralph Conrad on American Safari. Today I'm here in Gainesville, or just outside of Gainesville, with Murshida VA, and we're going to be making a savory sesame sourdough bread. Okay.
Which was named by?
Which was named by Miranda.
Miranda named it. Yeah.
Savory sesame
sourdough. Yeah.
It's called what's it called at the beginning? The alliteration, the S's.
Yes.
Savory sesame sourdough.
The reason it's savory is that it doesn't have the sweet. It's not a sweet bread.
Not sweet.
Right.
Because I guess the starter got out of hand, or?
Well, no. Usually starters are a little sour and don't lend themselves to sweet bread. It's just that in Florida we're fortunate enough that in the summer we get a starter fast, so we can make a sweet bread with it that's really delicious.
Okay.
But this is 24 hours, so it's ready for a traditional sourdough.
All right.
This is my traditional sourdough recipe.
Okay. And all sourdoughs start with the sourdough, the sourdough base.
Yes.
Okay.
The starter.
A starter. And can you tell us a little bit about the starter?
Yes. The starter is it's basically homemade yeast or natural yeast, which don't freak out. What it means is that all these little yeasts are floating around in the air.
So we're breathing them all the time?
We're breathing them all the time.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. If you really analyzed everything you're breathing every day, you realize that your immune system is phenomenal. You take 2 cups of flour and 1.5 cups to 2 cups of water, and you mix it together, and you put it in a container that's not sealed with like a little cloth cover for 24 hours. And then once a day for 7 days, you take it out of the container, you mix in 1/3 cup of water, 1/3 cup of flour. I use organic whole wheat flour for the starter, and then I lighten up mixing a white bread flour into the bread to lighten the dough.
Nice.
And at the end of 7 days, you put it in the fridge.
Okay, and can you use it at that time? Like
you can use
7 days. So if I wanted to make a sourdough at home, I would have to make the starter 7 days before I could make the bread.
Yes. And they say that I have read that the longevity of some sourdough starters is like mythological. Like some people's families have kept starters going for generations.
You just keep adding it and separating it.
Once a week.
Once a week.
You take 2 cups of starter and 1 cup to 1.5 cups of water and 2 cups of flour, and it can be more, but it has to be equal parts starter and flour.
So does it?
That's called refreshing it or feeding it.
Feeding. Does it change the flavor the longer the sourdough keeps going? Like these families that have had it for generations? Or?
Probably. I wouldn't know. The longest I've had a starter is 1.5 years. And this one I just started a couple of months ago, because I was realizing that I was going to be spending a lot of time at home, and one of the things that I love to do when I get to spend a lot of time at home is have sourdough bread going. Yeah.
Bake bread.
So.
Okay, so we're going to use the sourdough starter, and then what else are we going to be using today? We're
going to be using the bread flour, which is unbleached white organic bread flour. And we're going to be using these unhulled sesame seeds. Unhulled sesame seeds have the calcium, very high calcium content, as well as protein.
In the hull.
The hull of the sesame. And some organic flax that I ground myself, which we're almost out of, but we have just enough for the recipe.
Okay. Ground flax.
And Tibetan Himalayan pink salt.
Okay.
Any kind of great salt will do. You can use sea salt, you can use kosher salt, or you can use a salt like this, but much better than table salt, to use one of the nicer salts. Salt is actually very important to bread, to the flavor of bread.
Okay.
Because basically bread is, like you could take out the sesame and the flax, and you'd have flour, water, and salt, and you could make, that's what French bread is. That's,
right. Your basic.
But it's how you work with the dough that makes it a bread.
Okay.
However, by adding the flax, you not only put in the omega oils, which are super good for you, but you now make the bread something which will never be binding for your digestion. So instead of it being problematic for your digestion, it becomes healing for your digestion, which is fantastic. And then sesame makes it a solid whole protein. So basically, this is a bread that can be a meal. You eat it with a piece of fruit or some vegetables.
And you have fiber, protein, and carbohydrates.
It's fantastic. Yeah. It's really sustaining.
Yes, and I guess calcium too with the sesame hulls.
Exactly. And a lot, there's iron, there's,
Okay.
It's good stuff.
And then we're going to use a little bit of olive oil when we get to the baking.
Yes, I just olive oil. Any kind of olive oil. Organic's great. I'm just using extra virgin. I always use extra virgin. It tastes better. And this is very important, but I'm going to mess up your camera.
Is it in there?
After we rise, I'll show you the iron pan.
Okay.
I use an old iron frying pan.
Okay.
Actually, this is a small one.
The cast iron skillet?
Yes, cast iron skillets.
Okay.
Great for baking bread.
So you bake your bread in the skillet?
In the
okay.
cast iron skillet,
but, so
we'll be using a bigger one than
okay,
this.
but you need some type of pan for the baking, and then you have some measuring cups and mixing bowls.
Yes.
And you need a surface to work on.
And you need a surface to knead the bread, which is the magic that happens, is the kneading of the bread.
Okay.
And the cast iron's great because, I don't know if you know, but it leaches iron into the food. So
I didn't know that, but it's
really
a good iron, I guess?
Yeah.
Or? Okay.
Yeah, it's very good for you.
Well, that's everything we need. That's an explanation of what we're doing. We're going to take a pause for one moment and get into the bread making.
Awesome.
Okay. And we're back.
So, all right. So we're going to start by taking the starter out. We need 1.5 cups of the starter.
Oh, it looks cool. Blub.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it has people make their starters different thicknesses depending on how they like it.
And that's just a combination of adding more or less water?
Exactly, more water, more flour, however you want to do it. I like mine this way. Perfect. Yeah, a little bit more.
1.5 cups or 2 cups?
1.5 cups of starter.
Okay.
And 1 cup of water. And we're going to mix that together until it's very liquid. I will take care of this in a minute. So, the starter goes in first. And I had this amazing Austro-Hungarian grandfather who was a pastry chef who survived the Depression. And I grew up in his kitchen. He would bake. My grandmother cooked and he baked. And one of the things he always used to lecture me about was not wasting food because of having survived wars in Europe and then the Depression. And now I think that that's a good message. I've been thinking about my grandparents a lot lately when I'm in the kitchen. I kind of hear their voices in my head. And they rewashed plastic bags. They recycled things before anybody called it recycling. Their attic was full of all kinds of useful stuff, So, but they were surviving. They were saving money. And in these times, I think people really need to do that. We need to think about not throwing away so much and reusing what we can, and that could be a very positive effect of going through an economic challenging time economically.
Definitely.
So, I'm just going to run some water in there.
Okay.
If you're doing bread and you run water in the pans right away, cleanup is easy. Otherwise, it's not easy.
You gotta let it soak for a while.
Yeah,
it dries
exactly, because it's just really...
It's like concrete when it dries.
Exactly. That's right, you bake bread. So this is 1 cup of water and 1.5 cups of starter, and I'm just going to mix it. I'm mixing it until it becomes all a liquid of a smooth consistency. So right now you see there's still some...
And so you don't have to mix it very hard. It's just you can mix it gently.
Very gently. This is just to basically to get the starter to dissolve into the water. The one thing about starter is that, in Florida or warm climates, it's better to have one that's more solid, like I do, because if you put too much water in a starter, it can turn too sour, and anywhere where it's a warm climate, it's going to tend to do that, and anywhere where there's a lot of yeast and mold, it's going to tend to do that. So,
turn sour.
Yeah,
I
faster.
guess some people might like the really sour bread.
Well,
right?
yeah, but it really can get unpalatable if it gets too extreme. So you smell it. It's like, it'll be like, ooh. So this is about a tablespoon of salt.
Okay.
Very important to the flavor of bread. And half a cup of these beautiful unhulled sesame seeds. And I usually put, oh look, see, baking bread. That's what always happens. So, and I usually put a half a cup of the flax. I mill the flax myself. I'm a little short, but this is fine.